Okay. Yeah, well, there's so much to this topic, you know. I don't really even know how to begin talking about it, but basically, well, I just honestly hope, you know, a lot of these shifts will happen soon, and whomever you're working with, please tell them I'm sure they already know there's a real need, because I interface with people regularly, you know, my spiritual friends that are just struggling with basic things, and then, you know, when they're, I mean, there's so many layers to this issue, right? It's not just the money issue, it's also about just understanding how to manifest with reality. So, therefore, some of the discussions we're talking about, you know, like just this one girl this morning sent me a message on Facebook, and she said she's interested in starting up some online business and trying to help the Native Americans sell some of their products and etc., because she feels it's in her heart's love to be assisting these people, but then she doesn't even know how to do this and if it's going to work. And I just sent her a message back. You know, I mean, I think by working or not, she's talking about, is it going to, at one level, is it going to make enough money that it's sustainable, right? And I think I think, you know, tying back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, because money has been such a constraint for people in the externalized world, it it actually is one of the things that cuts off the backflow with source. Because when people are dealing with basic survival issues, you know, we could tell them all these things about, well, manifestation and techniques and all that, but it would only go so far, you know, at least as far as now, right? Because they're struggling with doing basic things, and it's easier to transmit these messages to people who are beyond a certain level of survival, I think. So then they have the free space to to try to learn a new set of behavior. Um, but I think overall, I see that it's very difficult for a lot of people. So hopefully, you know, with our individual efforts in different ways, we can help to shift that balance over, you know?
Yeah, it is a vast topic, and it's so central to the consciousness on this planet because everyone needs money. You know, so money becomes a big part of people's lives, and it becomes central to their survival here.
Yeah.
Um, and it's an illusion that's been created here because, as I explained, money doesn't represent value; it represents debt, less
Yeah.
of. So the whole monetary system has been hijacked here by the Anunnaki, and they created the system and have been using certain beings who their agents here to foster the system. But many of the old wealthy families are waking up to this. They don't want to be known. They don't want their names to be put out there because they've kept a very low profile and under the radar for centuries, and they don't want to be part of the because many of them are very spiritual people. They don't want to be part of this less of consciousness. They only understand the more of consciousness. So they're not necessarily part of the game that's been played yet. It's really a game that's been set up. But what has happened over the years is they've tried to use their money, the wealth that they have, it's not really money. They've tried to use the wealth to create a more functional world, create more peace in the planet, a place where people can, survive more easily but the whole system was hijacked by the Rothschild family.
Mm.
And they've been going for over 200 years on this planet, and it's got so bad that they are stealing left, right, and center from the old wealthy families. Um, it's very difficult for them to audit all of this because it's on a very grand scale. But I did the calculation. Solomon lived in the day in 900 BC, around about that time, and he became a very wealthy man. And if he lent $1 at that time to somebody, and his family kept doing that um, over time. They've accumulated wealth. If you add 1% interest onto that, would be somewhere in the region of $541 trillion, followed by 49 zeros.
Yeah,
Can you get your head around
I
that?
read that posting on
They are
your
not.
blog, on your timeline, and I was really, wow, I don't know what the word is, but it was a really illuminating moment, you know? I think these numbers, they show so much, right? It, 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 it yeah, it's quite, um, I, I, I'm a bit speechless. I don't know how to say it, but I understand what you're saying. Like, you know,
Yeah. So what they want to do is bypass the banking system, which is controlled by the Rothschilds. I don't know if you understand how it's controlled by the Rothschilds. There are basically four banking families that are interlinked with each other through marriage and so on. There's the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, and then there's the German families are the Loebs, Loeb,
hmm
and they've intermarried over the years, and they've had certain support from the Anunnaki, and they've created a banking system where they own most of the central reserve banks all around the planet.
hmm
They're the major shareholders in the Federal Reserve Bank, for instance. The Federal Reserve Bank is not owned by the U.S. government; it's privately owned by these bankers,
right,
and they have been manipulating the financial system for a long time on this planet. And now the older banking families don't trust them any longer, and they don't trust the governments of the planet any longer, because the governments are all being paid off by these banking families. So they are, and I'm involved with this, looking at ways we can eclipse that system.
right,
In other words, you create a system outside of that system, but using the infrastructure that already exists to create another system. And they understand that it's not their wealth that creates value, but it is human productivity and endeavor that creates value.
right,
So they want to create a system where they will pin as a kind of a bridge of consciousness. They're willing to put up the collateral that's required to eclipse the financial system. And, we're a long way down the track in doing that.
right, right. So basically, well, I know you said you're like, you signed secrecy agreements and stuff, so you couldn't talk about too much of it. But the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, even in the example that you had talked about this 500 trillions and what have you, is what what we're talking about is that there are these really ancient families that may still preserve the Chris codes in Keylontic term science, KS terms. They may still have the Chris codes, and some of the example I can think about would be like people in the Arturian times, like I believe Knights Templars were still preserving the Chris codes, and then the Cathars and what have you, and then I'm sure there would be comparables to that in the Asian cultures, and I would imagine like all around the 12 tribes on the planet, in different Americas, and I would think in Africa too, because you would think that if Chris codes is to be preserved, it would probably be among beings and peoples throughout the different planet and among the tribes, right? The original tribes. So if they all put away $1, then they would all have like 500 trillion by now or something like that. And then we're saying that these people actually, are they living inside the banking system or they're outside the banking system?
No, they're
Um,
outside the banking system.
they're okay. So if they're outside the banking system, so their wealth is, so it cannot be easily understood in regular human terms, right? Because an ordinary being thinks about their day-to-day activities in reference to dollars and currencies and banking system. So if people are living outside the banking system, how are they really inheriting that wealth? How are they exhibiting that wealth? Is it through DNA codes with different people on the planet that somehow through their activation then suddenly like a whole bunch of people on the planet would activate, and then they would reorient their consciousness and they would choose differently their economic activities, and then the ordinary beings wouldn't realize actually they're getting prompted to think in certain ways, but somehow they would suddenly then decide I really don't like this banking system and I should look for alternatives. So is that how their wealth is embodied on the planet?
Well, sort of, yeah, people tend to, maybe explain it this way. They realize that every human being on this planet is an expression of God. Mm-hmm. And an infinite being. So how do you ascribe any kind of value to something which is infinite?
You can't.
Not possible.
Yeah.
So what they are thinking, current thinking, is proposing a way to create a bridge of consciousness, so that eventually the world, this earth, moves towards a system of no money.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the system recognizes the infinite value of every being on this planet.
Right.
So what we're really trying to do is create a system now where there is a recording of the exchange of value, but the need for money is not necessary.
Yes, that is something I completely agree, because like we've already talked about, really the power of creation is in people's consciousness and their God source connection and what they choose to do with it, how they're manifesting. It should have nothing to do with survival, and it should have nothing to do with the regular economic dialogue of productivity. What does that even mean? It means absolutely nothing. Actually, if you look at all of the economic dialogues, the terms and the basic precepts that they're founded upon, it's nonsense. They don't make any sense within the context of infinite manifestation. Ideas like time-based productivity and, more productivity than last year, like all the mantras on Wall Street, they make no sense in context of all the spiritual discussion we're having. So we essentially have to have a new way of exchange. It's not, I don't even know if the word is exchange, but just a new way of planetary behavior altogether, and I still don't quite grasp how it's going to happen, except just people waking up within themselves and being more conscious and individually choosing to lean more toward the consciousness-based exchange ideas rather than money-based exchange. And the more people do that, the more it'll just show up in society, and
yeah.
And naturally, I think the banking and the currency and all of that stuff is going to just fade away, because fewer and fewer people are interested and give power to that. So that's, how long that's going to take, I don't know. But, when you look at how quickly Facebook changed everything, then this could change very quickly too.
Yeah. I don't know if you weren't probably alive when credit cards were introduced in this planet. But prior to that, there were just banks, and you issued checks and you drew cash, and that's how you made payments.
Yeah.
Then they introduced credit cards, and credit cards began to be used by people as money. So they would have a piece of plastic which would be put through a machine, and they would sign their signature on that piece of paper, and that took hold on this planet very quickly. Within 3 years, it was like 80% of the people, economically active people on this planet, had a credit card. Mm-hmm. They've tightened up the banking regulations since then, so you can't. It's not so easy to get credit cards. But at one stage in my life, I had 5 credit cards. Every bank wanted to give me a credit card.
Right. Right.
Now, the difference that we wanted to create is that you'll have that instrument. I won't say what it is, but it's a commonly used instrument that you can use on a day to pay it back.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that is how we start taking power away from a debt-based, banking-based system to one that is individually empower-based. Because at the end of the day, the reason we still have to have some kind of medium of exchange rather than just people show up and do something and disappear and then go somewhere else and do something is because I think we're still stuck in this like value exchange mentality where it people think that to put out something they need to get something back, right?
yeah,
Because if you didn't even have that, then why bother having any kind of anything? You just show up and do something and you go home. And obviously we're in contaminated body and everything, and then we have to eat and we have to do all these things that we don't seem to have a lot of choice over until, say, if someday, if we become more like you, Colin, where we don't have to eat so much, then even that need is gone. But it's not the level where the mass is at now. So, so I still think a main problem that's stymieing and slowing down the process is still this notion that people have that when they put out something, they want something back. And this is actually not really Christic because in all spiritual teaching, it's taught that when we give, it's an unconditional giving. You don't expect anything back. But the way of the universe is that it will actually give back to you in some fashion because that's just the way the universe operates. So it's
yeah,
almost like we're so paranoid and so insecure about preserving ourselves and our body or whatever we're trying to preserve that we need to we need to have assurance that we're going to get something back even though we're getting it back anyway, but we don't seem to really believe that truth, so we need to demand for something, and it's actually in the demanding that you lose a lot of the magic and you wind up atrophying yourself and the whole thing starts to shut down. So I really see that ultimately for us to be in a real pure land, you know, we have to let all this giving with expectation thing go, and that's probably going to take a little time. But in the meantime, at least let's try to do away with the big pothole, which is let's not allow for more theft to happen, and let's not allow for more, you know, debt debt based exchanges to happen. So, this thing that you're talking about, I'm not thinking of anything obvious in my head yet, but you know, I'll pray about it. It'll probably something will probably show up because there's only so many things that go around that everybody has with them all day long. So
yeah. Well, it's what I've been talking about earlier on is the value on this planet is in the people.
yeah,
The people are the value.
yeah,
And the more people who wake up and realize that I am the value, then it opens up that sense of self-worth. And
yeah,
that'll open up the connection to your godness, that I am the expression of God.
right,
And then the lens through which you observe your reality changes. I'm
yeah,
no longer dependent on money. I'm no longer
right,
dependent on external reality. I'm creating within. So if you have
right,
unlimited resources and unlimited ability to spend, you're going to be this most creative being.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah, and that
yeah,
that is that is what these families are trusting now. They also know because they're connected, spiritually, that the planet is going through a change, and it's going to move into a different harmonic universe. And so this is all in preparation for that, so that when humans go into the next harmonic universe, they'll be prepared, and the system